What if the crash already happened and nobody rang the bell? No trading floor panic, no headline crash, just your grocery bill that never came back down. A job market that quietly stopped hiring people like you, and homeless numbers climbing in cities that swear they're handling it. This isn't a recession. It's slower than that, and it's already inside your household. Let's start with the number that should be the headline every single week and never is. Over 60% of Americans now say they couldn't cover a $1,000 emergency without going into debt. Not people at the poverty line. People with jobs, with degrees, with a paycheck that lands every 2 weeks, like clockwork. That paycheck is still landing. It's just not landing far enough. Here's the part that makes 2026 different from every other rough patch in the last 20 years. It's not one thing breaking. It's 4 things breaking at the same time, and each one is making the other 3 worse. The first is jobs. Not no jobs, different jobs. Since late 2024, layoffs have hit tech, logistics, retail, and manufacturing in overlapping waves instead of one after another. That distinction matters more than people realize. When one industry cuts jobs, workers usually have somewhere to go. Laid off from retail, you try warehouse work. Laid off from warehouse work, you try delivery. That's how the labor market has absorbed shocks for decades. But when 4 industries contract at once, those exits close simultaneously. There's nowhere to pivot to. People are taking whatever's left, often at a pay cut of 15 to 30%. And here's the detail almost nobody's covering. Companies aren't pausing headcount and waiting for conditions to improve. They're restructuring so they never have to rehire. The automation gets installed. The outsourcing contract gets signed. The role doesn't come back because the role doesn't exist anymore. A recession reverses. This doesn't. Here's the layer under that first crack though, because the layoffs you've actually heard about aren't the full picture either. Nearly 36% of working Americans now depend on gig work, contract positions, or part-time hours to get by. When those jobs disappear, a contract ends, a platform changes its algorithm, a client stops calling, none of that shows up as an official layoff. There's no press release, there's no filing, the worker simply vanishes from the data. Because the data was never built to count them in the first place. Economists who study this closely estimate real job losses are running 2 to 3 times higher than the published numbers policymakers actually look at. A company can announce a layoff of 2,000 employees and quietly let go of 20,000 contractors in the same quarter, and only the first number ever makes the news. That gap between what's counted and what's actually happening is exactly why the unemployment rate can look stable while millions of households are already sliding. The second thing breaking is debt, and it's breaking fast. Total credit card debt in this country just crossed $1.1 trillion. That's a record, and it's not slowing down. Average balances are pushing toward $8,000 to $10,000 per household, at interest rates north of 22%. Do the arithmetic on that for a second. At that rate, a minimum payment barely touches the principal. The balance doesn't shrink. It grows quietly, every single month, whether you're paying attention or not. Millions of households are making their payments on time and still going backward. Picture a household earning $75,000 a year combined. 2 working adults, no criminal record with a bank, no history of missed payments. That's not a struggling household by any traditional measure. Now put a $6,000 emergency room bill in front of them, or a transmission that needs replacing, or 3 weeks of reduced hours because a manager cut the schedule. That gap doesn't get closed by a savings account, because 60% of households don't have one deep enough to absorb it. It gets closed by a credit card, and once it's on the card at 22%, it's not really a one-time expense anymore. It's a recurring monthly cost that didn't exist a year ago and doesn't go away just because the original bill got paid off. The third thing breaking is the cost of simply staying alive. Grocery prices are up over 25% since 2020. Insurance, both auto and home, is up 20 to 40% in the same window. In some states, far more. Utilities have jumped 30% or higher. Meanwhile, wages have crawled up somewhere around 4 to 6% a year. Read those numbers back to back. Wages up single digits. Everything you actually need to survive up double digits. That's not inflation cooling off like the headlines keep promising. That's a permanent gap that got built into your budget and never got dismantled. And the fourth thing breaking, the one tying all of this together, is housing. Rent in most American cities now runs somewhere between $1,800 and $2,500 a month for something entirely ordinary. A full-time worker earning $18 to $20 an hour takes home roughly $2,500 a month after taxes. Sit with that. Rent alone can eat an entire paycheck. Before groceries, before gas, before a single unexpected expense. That's not a math problem you solve by working harder. That's a math problem with no solution inside the paycheck itself. There's a fifth pressure stacked on top of the first four that most breakdowns skip entirely, and it's insurance. Home and auto premiums have climbed 20 to 40% in the last few years. And in states hit hardest by wildfire or storm risk, some homeowners have watched carriers pull out of the market altogether, leaving them with a state-backed policy of last resort that costs more and covers less. This isn't just a coastal problem or a disaster zone problem anymore. It's showing up in renewal notices in states that never used to think about this. And here's what makes it different from a rent increase or a grocery bill. You can't shop around your way out of it when the entire market in your area is repricing at once. The premium goes up, and there's no cheaper competitor 2 blocks over, because they raised their prices too. If you're doing the mental math on your own numbers right now, you're not the only one. Drop where you're feeling this most in the comments, whether it's rent, groceries, or the job market. I've read all of them, so where do these 4 pressures actually land? They land on the street, and the street is where this stops being an abstraction. Somewhere between 500,000 and 700,000 Americans are currently living full-time out of a vehicle, a car, a van, an RV. Some estimates put that number closer to 1 million once you count the people who don't show up in any official survey. The majority of them have jobs, they clock in every morning and come back to a parking space every night. The vehicle isn't a lifestyle choice. It's the last number in the monthly budget that doesn't come up negative. And now that last option's being taken away too. In the last 2 years, well over 100 cities have passed new ordinances restricting overnight parking, banning vehicle residency near schools and parks, or closing entire zip codes to overnight stays outright. Los Angeles alone committed more than $80 million to towing enforcement. A court decision in late 2025 reclassified lived-in RVs as vehicles rather than homes, which sounds technical until you realize what it actually changes. A landlord eviction requires paperwork, hearings, weeks of process. A tow requires none of that. A family can leave for a work shift and come back to an empty parking space. Their vehicle, their documents, their kids' school supplies, all of it gone to an impound lot with fees. Most of them will never be able to pay before it goes to auction. So say the RV gets towed. Where does that family go next? RV parks that used to charge $450 to $600 a month now run $900 to $1,500 if there's even a space open, and in several states, occupancy is sitting at 90 to 100%. Shelters in most major cities are running at or near full capacity year-round, and many families get turned away outright, especially if they have kids, a partner, or a pet, since a lot of shelter systems simply aren't built for that. So the answer, increasingly, is a tent. Encampments have grown 300 to 500% in a lot of counties since 2020. Some places have doubled in a single year. Here's the layer under that layer though, because the visible tents aren't even the biggest part of this picture. Homelessness estimates, official ones, are built almost entirely off of shelter counts and street counts on a single night. That method misses an enormous population. The people sleeping in cars, couch surfing between relatives, doubling up in 1-bedroom apartments with 3 other families. Researchers who study this closely estimate the real number of housing. Insecure Americans runs 2 to 3 times higher than the official figures being quoted in the news. That means the crisis being reported is, at best, a fraction of the crisis actually happening. It's not that officials are lying, it's that the way we count this problem was built for a smaller, simpler version of it, and it never got updated. Now, layer the money onto this, because this is where it stops looking like bad luck and starts looking like a pattern. While all of this has been happening, corporate America has posted record profits. Stock buybacks across the S&P alone crossed $950 billion in a single recent year. That's money that didn't go toward wages, didn't go toward hiring, didn't go toward keeping workers on payroll through a rough quarter. It went straight into share prices. CEO compensation climbed 13 to 18% a year. Through the exact same stretch these companies were cutting headcount. The industries doing the most cutting, tech, logistics, retail, were often the same industries posting the biggest gains. That's not a coincidence you can wave away. That's a business model, and the model works by moving cost off the balance sheet and onto the people who used to be employees. Think about what a stock buyback actually is for a second, because the term gets thrown around without anyone explaining the mechanics. A company takes cash that could go toward wages, toward hiring, toward keeping a workforce stable through a rough quarter, and instead uses it to purchase its own shares off the market. Fewer shares outstanding means each remaining share is worth more on paper. It's a direct, immediate way to boost the stock price without producing a single new product, a single new job, or a single dollar of value for anyone outside the shareholder base. Nearly $1 trillion moved through that exact mechanism in one recent year alone. At the same time, headcount was being cut across some of the very companies doing the buying. That's the trade-off in plain terms. The money existed. It just went somewhere other than the people who used to earn it. And this is the part that should genuinely worry you, whatever income bracket you're in. This isn't just a story about people at the bottom anymore. Nearly 1 in 3 Americans earning between $60,000 and $100,000 a year now describe themselves as struggling to keep up, not below the poverty line, well above the median household income, by most counts, and still barely making it through the month. A car repair, a medical bill, a slow month at work, that's the entire distance between a stable middle-class life and a sequence that starts with savings, moves to credit cards, and ends somewhere nobody plans on ending up. It's also changing where people live, not just how they live. Migration data shows a steady outflow from major metro areas over the last several years, and it's not just wealthy households chasing more space. It's teachers, nurses, skilled tradespeople, the households that used to anchor a neighborhood, citing cost of living and school funding as the reason for going. Once a family with kids leaves a city, the odds of that family coming back drop sharply. Enrollment falls, school funding formulas shrink with it, and the tax base that used to support basic services thins out year after year. That's not a poverty problem. That's a city quietly losing the middle layer that used to hold it together. And every household that leaves makes it slightly more expensive for the ones who stay. There's one more piece to this that doesn't get nearly enough attention, and it's the one that determines what this looks like 10 years from now instead of just this year. Current estimates put the number of homeless children in America somewhere between 1.3 and 1.5 million, up 40 to 60% over the last 4 years. These are kids sleeping in the back seat of a car or a van bunk, showing up to school without consistent meals or a reliable place to do homework. Researchers have been tracking this population for decades, and the finding is consistent across nearly every study. Housing instability in childhood tracks directly into higher rates of poverty, illness, and instability in adulthood. Every family pushed out of an apartment this year, every RV that gets towed with kids inside it, is a data point that won't fully show up for another 20 years. This isn't only a crisis about who's struggling today. It's quietly deciding who struggles in 2045. So why isn't anyone fixing this? It's not corruption, and it's not that nobody cares. It's structural. Housing policy sits with state and local zoning law. Healthcare funding runs through federal programs. Labor policy is shaped by a completely different set of rules. No single office holds both the authority and the budget to fix this end to end, and the incentives that do exist reward the wrong things. Clearing an encampment takes a morning and produces footage by afternoon. Building housing that actually solves the underlying shortage takes 3 to 5 years and produces nothing photogenic in the meantime. So cities keep funding the visible response, the towing, the sweeps, the enforcement, because it looks like action, while the actual shortage driving all of it barely gets touched. Election cycles make this worse, not better. A ribbon cutting on a new shelter or a press conference announcing an encampment sweep gets coverage the same week it happens. A zoning reform that actually increases housing supply doesn't show results for years, long after the officials who pushed it are out of office or running for something else. So the incentive isn't to fix the underlying shortage, it's to be seen doing something about the symptom. Cities pour money into enforcement, into towing budgets, into temporary shelter contracts, because that spending is visible and defensible in a budget hearing. Prevention, the kind that would actually shrink these numbers over time, competes for scraps because it doesn't produce a headline on a 2-year timeline. That's not a conspiracy. It's just what happens when the system rewards motion over progress. And motion is easier to fund than results. Here's where this heads if none of that changes. Projections across multiple research groups put another 1.5 to 2.5 million households at risk of housing insecurity in the next 2 years alone. Rent is projected to keep climbing another 5 to 9% a year. Shelter capacity is already maxed out in most major cities, and the fallback option, vehicle living, is the one being actively dismantled right now, city by city, ordinance by ordinance. None of this required a single dramatic headline. No crash, no crisis with a press conference. It broke the way most important things break, slowly, in 1,000 individual households, each one thinking their situation was a personal failure, instead of what it actually is. A system quietly moving in one direction while the people underneath it are told everything is fine. This isn't a story about bad decisions, it's a story about math. What work pays versus what survival costs. What housing takes versus what wages actually reach. What a job used to guarantee versus what it guarantees now. None of those gaps closed on their own in the last 5 years, and nothing currently on the table at the city level or the federal level is sized to close them either. until that changes. Not with another towing budget, not with another press release, not with another task force that produces a report and no funding. This keeps going exactly the direction it's been going, and it keeps landing on households that did everything they were told would keep them safe. You've seen the numbers now. What part of this hit closest to home for you? The job market, the debt, or the housing math? Tell me in the comments. If you want to see the full story of how this plays out for a single family, watch Millions of American Families Are Living in RVs, and Nobody Notices on the left. And if you want to see exactly where your grocery money is going and which stores are quietly overcharging you for it, watch 6 Worst Grocery Stores You Should Never Buy Produce and 5 Great Ones on the right. Don't forget to subscribe.